welcome back to A Third Place. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad you're here. This channel is for anyone who's ever felt lonely in a crowded room, missed the closeness of childhood friendships, or wondered why belonging feels so much more difficult as an adult. Last week, we explored something that I think many of us very quietly experience. We talked about how adult friendships aren't necessarily becoming weaker because we're doing something wrong. They're changing because our lives have changed. When we were younger, friendships happened inside built-in communities. School, universities, sports teams, neighborhoods, sports clubs, student clubs. We didn't have to search for connection. Connection found us because we shared life with the same people every single day. But adulthood removes many of those built-in opportunities. Instead of seeing the same classmates every morning, we spend hours commuting, working, running errands, paying bills, trying to keep up with life. And then we wonder why friendship feels so difficult. But understanding why is only the first step. The next question is, how do we actually build meaningful friendships? Not friendships that exist only online, not acquaintances whose names we barely remember, but the kind of friendship where someone notices when you've become quiet, the kind where someone asks how you're really doing, the kind where someone asks how you're really doing, and genuinely waits for the answer without rushing you or making you feel uncomfortable. Today, I want to share something that completely changed how I view and think about friendships, because I don't believe we're failing at making friends. I think many of us have simply misunderstood how friendship actually grows. Part 1. Friendship isn't found, it's grown. I think one of the biggest misconceptions we've carried with us into adulthood is the belief that friendship begins with instant chemistry. We imagine meeting someone for coffee, having an amazing conversation, and somehow knowing this person is going to become one of my closest friends. Sometimes that happens, but for most of us, that's not how our closest friendships actually began. Think about someone you've known for many years. A childhood best friend, a university roommate, someone you still talk to today. If you go back to the very beginning, chances are there wasn't anything particularly extraordinary about your first conversation. Maybe you sat beside each other in class. Maybe your lockers happened to be next to one another. Maybe you were assigned to the same group project. Maybe you simply kept running into each other. At the time, it probably felt pretty ordinary. But ordinary moments have a remarkable way of becoming extraordinary relationships. Friendship doesn't usually arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly. One conversation, then another. One shared laugh, then another. One, see you tomorrow, then another. Looking back, we often remember the deep conversations, the long road trips, the milestones. But friendship wasn't built there. It was built long before that, through consistency. As adults, I think we place a lot of enormous pressure on one conversation, one networking event, one meetup, one coffee, one conversation. And if we don't immediately feel a deep connection, we instantly assume maybe we just weren't meant to be friends. But perhaps we're asking one conversation what used to take months. Instead of asking, could this become my best friend? Maybe we shift the question to, would I enjoy talking to this person again? That question shift removes so much pressure, because friendship is not about finding someone perfect. It's about giving connection enough time to grow. Part 2. Stop looking for best friends. Start looking for familiar faces. A while ago, I came across a bit of information that I researched that completely changed the way in which I think about friendships. Communication researcher Dr. Jeffrey Hall from the University of Kansas wanted to understand a surprising simple question. How long does it actually take for people to become friends? His research found something very fascinating. On average, it takes around 50 hours of constant communication for acquaintances to become casual friends, around 90 hours to become genuine friends. And that's a 90, not a 19. And more than 200 hours of quality time together before most people would consider someone a close friend. Think about that for a moment. 200 hours. Not one coffee, not one dinner, not one perfect conversation. 200 hours. When I heard that statistic, it honestly made me feel relieved because it reminded me that if friendship feels slow, it's because friendship is supposed to be slow. Deep relationships are not built in a weekend. They're built over ordinary days. There's another idea in psychology called the mere exposure effect, introduced by psychologist Robert Zajonc. It suggests that seeing the same people repeatedly actually makes us feel more comfortable around them. Not because we've had profound conversations, but because familiarity quietly lowers our guard. Think about your favorite local cafe, the first time you entered that place. It probably felt unfamiliar. Maybe you weren't sure what to order. Maybe you didn't know what food to get. But after your 10th visit, the room felt different. You recognized the barista. They recognized you. You smiled. They smiled back. Nothing dramatic happened, but familiarity created comfort. Friendship often works the same way. And honestly, you don't have to search very hard online to realize how many adults are struggling with exactly this. I spent some time reading discussions on Reddit in communities like r/social skills, r/lonely, and r/make new friends here, where thousands of adults talk openly about how difficult it is to build meaningful friendships after school or university. One person actually wrote something that really stayed with me. They wrote, "I don't even know where adults go to make friends anymore." Another person shared what meeting different people sometimes feels like. They said, "We're interviewing each other instead of actually just getting to know each other." And another comment simply said, "I don't need 100 friends. I just wish I had someone who would text me first." Is that not gut-wrenching? Reading these different stories reminded me of something important. Loneliness isn't unique. It isn't something only you are experiencing. It's something that so many people quietly carry. But I also noticed another pattern. Many people weren't just looking for friendship. They were looking for a best friend. Someone who would instantly understand them without explaining themselves. Someone they could tell everything to without being judged. Someone who would miraculously erase years of loneliness after one or two conversations. And while that longing is deeply understandable, it's also an enormous expectation to place on someone that you've literally just met. Maybe instead of looking for your next best friend, start looking for your next familiar face. The person you see every Saturday at the farmer's market. The woman who always attends the same yoga class. The man reading in the same cafe every Tuesday morning. The volunteer you always end up working beside. The friendships that change our lives often begin with simple familiarity. Before people become important, they become familiar. And maybe that's something our generation has forgotten. We're trying to skip straight to lifelong friendship without giving ourselves enough ordinary moments for trust to quietly grow. That's one of the reasons why this channel is called A Third Place. Because I don't think what we're missing is only friendship. I think we're missing places where friendship naturally has the opportunity to happen organically. Part 3. Awkwardness isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. Can I tell you something that I wish someone had told me years ago? Awkwardness is not evidence that you're bad at making friends. It's actually evidence that you're doing something brave. Somewhere along the way, I think we've fallen into the trap of believing that meaningful conversations should feel effortless. Maybe it's because we're surrounded by carefully edited moments online, videos where everyone seems charismatic, confident, funny, naturally outgoing. But real conversations really don't look like that. Real conversations have pauses. Someone forgets your name. Someone laughs at the wrong moment. Someone accidentally interrupts. Someone says, "Sorry, I actually really don't know how to start conversations." And you know what? Most people are relieved when that happens. It feels like you don't have to perform. Because moments like that remind us as people that we're not the only ones feeling nervous. And mistakes happen. Psychologists have even found something called the liking gap. Research suggests that after people leave conversations, they believe that they were liked significantly less than they actually were. In other words, we tend to judge ourselves way more harshly than the other person actually does. Think about that. You might leave a conversation replaying every awkward pause in your head, while the other person is walking away thinking, "That was really nice. I hope I see them again." How many opportunities have we missed because we have assumed that other people like us significantly less than they actually did? So instead of waiting until you feel completely confident, try reminding yourself that confidence usually comes after experience, not before it. The next time you meet someone you enjoy talking to, don't worry about saying the perfect thing. Simply say, "It was really nice talking with you," or "I hope I can see you again next week." Small invitations often become meaningful relationships, not because they're extraordinary, but because they create another opportunity to keep showing up. And as we've been talking about throughout this video, friendship isn't built in one perfect conversation. It's built through many ordinary ones. Part 4. Become the friend you're hoping to find, but don't lose yourself. There's something personal that I'd like to share with you. Because as much as I love talking about research, psychology, and community, I also think some of the most meaningful lessons come from the seasons of life that challenged us the most. For me, one of those seasons was actually during my undergraduate years. I've always been someone who genuinely enjoys being around people and sharing company. If someone looked like they were sitting alone or had no friends coming to eat with them, I'd naturally go and sit with them. If someone seemed like they needed encouragement, I would go out of my way to encourage them. If someone needed help with an assignment or wanted someone to listen to them, I would gladly give of my time to help. Looking back, I don't regret that part of myself. I still believe genuine kindness is one of the most beautiful things we can offer to one another as people. But there was something that I misunderstood back then. Without even realizing it, I'd begun to treat kindness like it was some form of investment. Not consciously, not because I even wanted something from people, but because somewhere deep down, I believed that if I consistently showed up for other people, then they would naturally do the same for me. I thought, if I'm a good friend, surely good friendships would automatically follow. But life doesn't always work out that way. As university went on, I started noticing a pattern. Someone only reached out when they needed lecture notes, or when they needed help with an assignment, or when they needed help with studying, or anything that would benefit them. Sometimes weeks, even months would go by without hearing from any of these people. Then suddenly, my phone would light up. Not because they wanted to spend time together, not even because they wanted to know how I was doing, but because they needed something. And each time I told myself, maybe next time will be different. Eventually, though, with time, I had to admit something that was painful. A lot of those relationships were not friendships. They were transactional. As long as I could provide something, my presence was valuable. But when I had nothing left to offer, the relationships quite literally disappeared. And if you've ever experienced that, I just want to say something. That kind of disappointment can make you question yourself. It can make you wonder if you're asking for too much, if you're somehow difficult to like, even love, or if being kind is even worth it in this type of world. But over time, I learned that the biggest lesson I had to learn was not even about other people. It was about myself. Because while some people were being transactional, I had to acknowledge something uncomfortable. I had quietly attached expectations to my kindness. I expected reciprocity. I expected people to care the same way that I cared. I expected effort to be matched. And when it wasn't, I felt deeply hurt. That realization led me to a season of where I had to do a lot of internal work, mentally, emotionally, and most importantly, spiritually. I had to ask myself questions that were not easy. Was I still being kind if I secretly expected kindness to be reciprocated back to me? Could I love people without making their response determine my worth? Could I accept the fact that not everyone has the same capacity, the same emotional maturity, or even the same understanding of friendship? Those weren't questions I answered overnight. They took time. There were moments of disappointment, moments of loneliness, moments where I wondered if genuine friendship even existed. But slowly, something inside of me began to change. I stopped measuring my kindness by other people's responses. Instead, I started seeing kindness as part of the person I wanted to become. Not because it guaranteed anything, but because it reflected my values. And fascinatingly enough, that shift changed the type of relationships that I began building. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. As I became more comfortable being myself, I also became more aware of who was genuinely showing up. I learned that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart. Kindness and boundaries can exist together. You can care very deeply about people, whilst also recognizing when a relationship is completely one-sided. You can continue believing in the goodness of people without ignoring the repeated patterns that hurt you. One of the biggest misconceptions that I used to have was believing the fact that being the friend you hope to find meant saying yes to everyone. It doesn't. Being the friend you hope to find means being honest, reliable, compassionate, present. But it also means respecting yourself enough to recognize when someone is constantly taking without giving. Healthy friendships aren't perfectly equal every single day. Sometimes one person carries more because the other is going through a difficult season. That's part of caring for one another. But over the long term, healthy friendships involve mutual effort, mutual respect, mutual care. Not because anyone is keeping score, but because both people genuinely want to invest in the relationship. So if you've spent years trying to be a good friend, and you're wondering why you haven't found people who love you in the same way, please don't let those experiences convince you into becoming cynical. Don't let it harden your heart. Instead, let it make you wiser. Choose your relationships more carefully. Pay attention to consistency instead of promises. Notice who celebrates your wins without jealousy. Notice who checks in when they don't need anything. Notice who remembers the little things you've shared. Those are often the people who are quietly showing you what genuine friendship looks like. And here's the part I want you to hold on to. Being the friend you hope to find doesn't guarantee that every person you meet will become that friend. Some people will misunderstand your kindness. Some people will only appreciate you for what you can do for them. Some people will come into your life for only a season, and that's okay. Because every experience that you go through teaches you something about the type of relationships that you want to build moving forward. With enough time, with enough healthy boundaries, and with a willingness to keep showing up as your authentic self, you'll begin to find people who don't just receive your kindness, they return it. Not because you earned it, but because kindness recognizes kindness. And those friendships, the ones built on mutual care rather than mutual convenience, are often the ones that stay with us for years. I think that's one of the hopeful things about friendship. You don't have to convince the right people to value you. The right people will not only value what you can offer, they'll appreciate who you are. And those are the kind of friendships worth waiting for. Part 5. Belonging isn't something you find, it's something you build. As we've been talking today, I hope you've noticed something. None of the things we've discussed happen overnight. Not trust, not friendship, not belonging. And maybe that's why so many of us become so discouraged. We live in a world that celebrates immediacy. We can order food with a few taps, watch an entire series of a television show in one weekend, have groceries delivered to our front door. Almost everything around us has become faster, except relationships. Relationships still move at the pace they always have. They ask for time, presence, patience, and repeated moments. There's a quote that I once came across that has stayed with me for years. People come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Whether or not you've heard that saying before, I think there's a lot of wisdom in it. Not everyone you meet is meant to become your best friend. Some people teach us lessons. Some people walk beside us during one chapter of our lives. Some people stay. None of those relationships are failures simply because they ended. Sometimes they gave us exactly what we needed in that moment of our journey. I think one of the most freeing realizations I've had is this. Not every friendship is meant to last forever, and that's okay. When we stop expecting every relationship to become permanent, we become much more present for the relationships that we're experiencing right now. Instead of asking, will this person be in my life 10 years from now? Maybe ask, how can I care well for the time that we do have together? Sometimes that's enough. In fact, I think that's more than enough, because every meaningful friendship you've ever admired started as something incredibly ordinary. Two strangers, one conversation, a familiar face, a shared laugh, a simple, see you next week. No one could have predicted where those moments would lead. And that's the beautiful thing about friendship. You don't always realize the beginning whilst you're living it. Sometimes you only see it years later, when you're looking through old photos, remembering old conversations, laughing about stories that you never imagined would become memories. That's why I believe we should stop chasing perfect friendships and start creating opportunities for ordinary ones. Go back to the cafe, return to the volunteer group, keep attending the language exchange, become a regular somewhere. Not because you're guaranteed to meet your future best friend, but because you're creating the conditions where friendship has the chance to grow. And maybe, just maybe, someone else keeps coming back for exactly the same reason. Closing. Before we finish today's conversation, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. If you've been feeling lonely lately, I hope you know this. You're not behind, you are not failing at adulthood, and there's nothing wrong with you because building friendships feels difficult. In many ways, you're trying to do something incredibly human. In a world that makes genuine connection often feel incredibly difficult, that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it takes intention. So this week, instead of putting pressure on yourself to make a new best friend, I'd love for you to try something much smaller, much gentler. Find one place you can return to. One place where the same faces begin to recognize you. Maybe it's your local cafe, maybe it's a community garden, a pottery class, a church, a hiking group, a volunteer organization, a tennis club, a bookshop with regular events, whatever it is. Don't go there with the goal of impressing anyone. Go there simply to become familiar. Because before people become our closest friends, they usually become familiar faces. And familiar faces, given enough time, have a beautiful way of becoming the people who make a place feel like home. You know, when I first started a third place, I wasn't just thinking about physical places. I was thinking about these conversations, this little corner on the internet where people could come each week and be reminded that they're not the only ones navigating loneliness in adulthood and the search for belonging. If you've ever left any one of these videos feeling a little less alone, then I think we're already building something together. Maybe not a building, maybe not a cafe, but a community. And every community begins the same way, with people who keep showing up. So thank you. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. Thank you for commenting, for your stories, for trusting me with parts of your life that aren't always easy to share. I read them more often than you probably realize. And every time I do, I'm reminded that behind every username is a real person who simply wants what all of us want: to feel seen, to feel understood, to feel like they belong somewhere. And I hope in some small way, this channel can become one of those places. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where is your third place right now? Maybe you've already found one. Maybe you're still searching. Or maybe this week you're going to take your very first step to creating one. I genuinely love to hear your story. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to continue this journey with us. Because next week, we're going to explore something that sits at the heart of everything that we've talked about so far. We're going to ask a question that I think every adult has wrestled with at some point in their lives. Why does it sometimes feel like I don't belong anywhere? We'll talk about why that feeling is becoming increasingly common, the psychology behind belonging, and more importantly, how we can begin creating a sense of home, even when we're far from the places or the people we once knew. I hope you'll join me for that conversation. Until then, be patient with yourself. Keep showing up. Keep believing that meaningful friendships are still possible, because they are. Sometimes they're simply growing quietly, long before we realize they're becoming something beautiful. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week here at A Third Place. Bye.